You know, we think of modern air travel as just incredibly safe. It's almost a routine part of life now. But imagine this. It's a hot July evening in 1996. TWA Flight 800 takes off from New York. Just minutes later, it's 14,000 feet above the Atlantic, and it's just blown out of the sky. 230 people gone in an instant. It's one of those moments that completely shatters our sense of security, and it forces us to ask a really terrifying question.
Right. How does this happen? That's the central mystery we're going to dig into. Because this isn't just about bad luck. Not at all. Think of this as a detective story. We're going to piece together the evidence from some of aviation's worst disasters to figure out how these catastrophes happen and, maybe more importantly, what we can learn from them. This quote from the son of a crash victim really gets to the heart of it all. These events, they aren't just random acts of fate. Almost always, they're the very last link in a long chain of human decisions, of flawed designs, and of missed warnings. A chain that could have been, and really should have been, broken.
So to understand why, you got to go back to the boom in air travel. The competition between giants like McDonnell Douglas and Boeing was absolutely fierce. There was this immense pressure to build bigger, faster, and cheaper planes. And sometimes, in that race, the absolute need for safety got pitted against the drive for profit.
And here's the thing to remember. These crashes aren't just statistics. They are man-made catastrophes, born from engineering errors. Every single one is a brutal, expensive lesson that forces the entire industry to confront a failure to imagine the truly unthinkable.
Let's see this in action with our first case study, the McDonnell Douglas DC-10. Now, when this thing was unveiled back in 1970, it was a star. It was beautiful, pilots loved it, and it was a real moneymaker for the airlines. On paper, it was a total winner.
But then, disaster. Just outside Paris, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 fell from the sky. The impact was so violent, the wreckage was almost unrecognizable. 346 people died. One of them was a man named François Juin, and his 5-year-old son Bruno would end up spending years of his life just trying to understand what happened to his dad.
Okay, so to get why this happened, we need a super quick physics lesson. When you're at 30,000 feet, the air is way too thin to breathe, so the plane's cabin is pressurized, basically filled with compressed air. Now here's what's wild. This creates an immense outward force. The plane is literally trying to burst open like a balloon, and all that force is pushing hardest on the biggest, flattest surfaces, like the doors.
And this is exactly where the design failed. A faulty latch on the cargo door just gave way. The door blew out, and that caused this massive, sudden decompression in the cargo hold. Well, the cabin floor directly above it wasn't designed for that, so it collapsed. And when it collapsed, it severed every single hydraulic cable that the pilots used to control the plane. Think about it like this. It's like losing your steering and your brakes in your car at the exact same second. The pilots weren't pilots anymore, they were just passengers.
But here is the most damning part of this whole story. This exact same failure had happened 2 years earlier on another DC-10. The cargo door blew out, the floor collapsed, but by sheer dumb luck, the control cables were only damaged, not completely cut. The pilots somehow managed to land the plane, the flaw was known, the risk was understood, but a real comprehensive fix wasn't made mandatory. And because of that, 346 people paid the ultimate price.
And as Bruno Druin, the son of the victim we mentioned, found out years later, this wasn't just bad luck. It was an absolutely known problem. An internal memo from one of the door's own designers literally warned that a loss of life was likely to happen. It's just a chilling example of the human cost of ignoring a flaw that you know is there and you can prevent.
So let's jump back to TWA Flight 800. After that crash, a lot of people suspected a bomb, or maybe even a missile. But as investigators painstakingly pulled 95% of that aircraft from the ocean floor and rebuilt it, they found zero evidence of terrorism. The horrifying truth had to be somewhere inside the plane itself, a hidden danger in its very design.
I mean, the plane's black boxes told a chillingly short story. The flight was totally normal for about 12 minutes, and then the cockpit voice recorder just stops, mid-sentence. That tells you that some abrupt, catastrophic event happened with absolutely no warning.
So, what was it? Investigators eventually found the source. The central fuel tank had exploded. But why? Okay, let's break this down. First, to save money on fuel, airlines often flew with the big central tank nearly empty. On that hot day, the little puddle of fuel left inside heated up and turned into a highly explosive vapor.
Second, right underneath that tank were the plane's air conditioning units, pumping out heat and basically cooking that vapor to a critical state. And finally, investigators found bundles of old, cracked wiring. A short circuit allowed a high-voltage current to jump into the fuel tank's low-voltage sensor wiring, creating the one thing you don't want, a fatal spark. The original designers just never imagined the plane would be operated this way, and in doing so, they'd created a bomb in the belly of the aircraft. For the families like Madziem Kivics, whose sister Jill was a flight attendant on that plane, all the technical reasons don't matter as much as one simple truth. As he put it, you just can't put a price tag on safety. It's not so hard to do the right thing.
So the industry learned. You have to fix known flaws, and you have to account for how planes are actually being used. But what about the next level? How do you engineer for problems that have never, ever happened before? Well, that brings us to the ultra-modern Boeing 770, one of the safest planes ever built.
So it's 2008. British Airways Flight 38 is just seconds from landing at Heathrow after a long flight from Beijing. Everything is perfectly normal. And then, suddenly, both engines fail to respond. They lose all power. In that moment, a 200-ton, state-of-the-art jetliner had just become a glider, with thousands of people on the ground right below it.
And the cause was something engineers didn't even know could happen. It turns out that on the long, extremely cold flight through Siberia, tiny water crystals that are naturally in jet fuel slowly built up as ice on the inside of the fuel pipes. Then, when the pilots called for more power to land, that sudden surge of fuel sent a slushy avalanche of ice forward, which slammed into and clogged the engine's fuel heater. The engines were completely starved of fuel at the most critical moment possible.
And all of this, every one of these tragedies, brings us to the ultimate goal, the core principle that has evolved from all this heartbreak. It's the constant, never-ending battle for a truly fail-safe design.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to one core idea: fail-safe design. It just means that when one thing goes wrong, even if it's something catastrophic, the plane has to still be flyable. A single failure can't be allowed to cascade into a total loss of the aircraft. And this brings us right back to the DC-10. Remember, in another crash in 1979, an engine literally broke off the wing during takeoff. Now that should have been survivable, but when the engine ripped away, it also severed the hydraulic lines. Just like the Turkish Airlines crash, the pilots lost all control. That was a fundamental failure of the fail-safe principle.
When you look at this, you can really see the legacy. Each disaster taught a very specific, hard-won lesson. From Turkish Airlines 981, we learned that ignoring a known flaw is unforgivable. From American 191, that a single failure must not be catastrophic. From TWA 800, that you have to think about how new ways of operating planes affect old designs. And from British Airways 38, that even your most advanced systems can't predict every little thing.
And here it is. Here is the single most important result of learning those lessons. Because the industry learns and adapts and re-engineers, fatal accidents today are 6 times rarer than they were 30 years ago. That's an incredible, quantifiable improvement in safety, all of it paid for at a terrible, terrible cost.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, the core lessons are crystal clear. You have to fix what you know is broken, immediately. You have to design systems so they don't collapse from a single blow. You've got to constantly reassess your designs under new conditions. And, most of all, you have to recognize that the battle to eliminate error never, ever ends.
Which leaves us with one last, big thought. As our technology gets more and more complex, and the world gets more unpredictable, is a truly 100% fail-safe system even possible? Or are we always going to be in this race to learn from the last failure, just hoping we can prevent the next one?